All right, on the workbench today again is the Paul Reed Smith David Grissom Trem. So what do we know and what don't we know? We know it needs a fret dress, a little bit of playing wear, some high frets, loose frets. We know we have to do that. There's a little bit of headstock damage. We got to take a look at that. I have decided to pull these pickups out. I'm going to replace the volumes for the pickup just because of the soldering is pretty poor. I may replace the switch and I may replace the tone. So pickups for sure, volumes for sure. Not sure about the tone control or the switch. Got to disassemble and clean and detail this bridge. So at that point, we've got a lot of the parts out. Tuning machines are going to come off. Pickups are going to come out. Electronics, all the electronics are going to come out. And I may end up doing a cut and buff to the finish just to try to polish it up. And I'm leaning towards doing the touch up on these two spots on the lower bout that we looked at in video 1. From there, you know, the back has some light scratching. I have not decided about the ding on the neck around the 7th fret. So I think we're going to dive in and we're going to get this thing disassembled so that if I decide to do all the finish work, I don't have any parts on there and I can get to it. So do the fret dress first and then I'll get a look at that headstock and see what needs to be done to fix that. And away we go, I say. All right, let's dive into this. All right, tuning machines. Oh, that's tight. So that piece has to come all the way out in order to slide that out. Make sure we don't lose any parts. So here's our first chance to take a look at this headstock damage up close. So yeah, it definitely seems to be cracked all the way through here. A little bit of cracking looks like just in the finish going up to the B tuning machine hole. A little bit of crack in the finish over here. So I want to make sure to adhere that back down and then we'll see what we can do about the rest of the finish there. So we'll take a look at that. Let's get the electronics out of here. All right, if you watched part 1, you've seen this before. So here are the pickup leads. It looks like the heat shrink fell off of the bridge coil tap on those lace pickups. And overall, just a pretty bad job of soldering in here. So all of this is going to get redone. Haven't decided if we're putting it back to stock on there, but plenty of time to decide that. I've had people over the years bring me a guitar and say, yeah, I resoldered everything and everything's right. It doesn't work. And so that always mystified my brain for a minute. And really, if you wire everything right, but you use the wrong solder, I suppose technically that would be correct. So here's how I begin to fix bad soldering. Because I will spend more time trying to fix other people's work than I will if I just completely rewire it. There's no sense in wasting my time trying to polish a turd. So it really looks like they did more than just swap the pickups. They melted insulation on the wire. I mean, they just didn't do a good job. Okay, so that is all of the wiring basically disconnected. Just bad work. Let's get this output jack out of here. I dig this plate. Let's get these potentiometers out of here. Want to be careful not to drop the washer and different things on the finish. I think this finish has had a hard enough time of it. Hang on, hold the show. What do we got here? What did I miss? It's not as satisfying when I miss a wire. Aha! The Death Bucker. 5K. So it's not the standard, it's the hotter version. And let's see. This one's the standard alumitone. So we've got one Death Bucker and one standard alumitone. All right, what do we got here? 5/18/2012. Some random markings, UPC code, serial number. So that's kind of fun. I've never seen the inside of a bridge pickup on a Paul Reed Smith. Here we go inside the neck. Some more markings. All right, let's take a look at the bridge here. 4 springs on there. Interesting. So they're certainly, of course, removable, but they are a tight fit with a secondary bend. Usually a Trem spring has an L-shaped bend slightly less than 90, but these have a secondary bend right down here that make them fit extremely tight into there. Personally, just my opinion, I think that's unnecessary over-engineering. I really, really dislike this secondary bend. I think it's pretty stupid. I think it's unnecessary, and you're just increasing the likelihood that you damage something trying to get these out. I don't like those at all. There's that little groove that the Trem pivots on. All right, so now we've got the guitar disassembled, and that way I can get at all of the finish, cut and buff it if I so decide to. I can get at this, can work on the frets without disrupting anything else, and then when I'm done with everything and ready to put all the electronics in, I just have a clean slate. Everything's ready to go back in. Looking at the frets earlier, there were some rocks, and I am not seeing anywhere where the feeler gauge goes in on any of the frets. 6, 7, 15 was really bad in terms of rocking, but I don't see any fret moving at all. So 6 is rocking, but in terms of the fret seating, it's rock solid on there. So if I go through these, I think what I want to do is just gently clean up the gunk. There's a bunch of green gunk at the bottom of the fret crown. I'll know as I start leveling that if the fret rocks after I've leveled just a little bit, it has to be loose. But I don't see any of these frets moving at all. So I'm not scraping wood, I'm just dragging it away from the fret enough to pull that gunk away from the fret. And all of these are going to get level crowned and polished, and then we'll lightly abrade the board with a little bit of micro mesh just to smooth it out. No steel wool. Alright, so let's get this sucker straight, eh? Pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and tape this fingerboard off. Looks like I got a little bit of adhesive and stuff on there. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is naphtha, it evaporates really quickly. Don't always have to do this, but I see some tape residue on there. Not dripping wet, not soaking wet, just damp. Got to resist the temptation to abrade across the grain. Always, always, always with the grain. I've used white Scotch-Brite pads, pink Scotch-Brite pads to do this sort of stuff, but I've really come to like the micro mesh. Doesn't leave minerals behind or shavings behind. So all I'm trying to do is get rid of any little burnish marks, scraping marks, and not go that way. Do not go across the grain. You want to go with the grain. See, the old Silvertones and Harmonies a lot of times have these really bad cross-grain scratches in them. This way, if I'm hitting the frets a little bit along with the wood here, it's okay because it's the same abrasive. See how nice those frets look. Back looking at the headstock here, I took the tuning machines off as I was disassembling the guitar, and I noticed the first screw I went to take off on this high E tuner came out really hard, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. The rest of them came out the way you would expect. As I was working on the fret dress, I did look, and I noticed that there's a blob of glue in here. And that made sense because as I was trying to just move this cracked area, well, it wouldn't move. And it's a shame. It's why I'm very cautious to talk about DIY guitar repair. I know that it's a popular thing, and frankly, that's how a lot of us get into working on guitars, is we just start tearing into things. But whoever did this glue job failed to get it flush. And that's kind of like rule number one if you're doing crack repair or structural repair. You want it to go back together as flush as possible. So now we've got this main chip that's up above the rest of the wood. And there are a few options that we could do. We could try to remove this, but if it's glued, chances are it's pretty solid. Even if it was poorly glued, this little chunk right here could be really adhered into this. Trying to remove that could cause more damage. The area could be flushed by sanding and abrading it flush, but what that's going to do is it's going to remove all the finish in this area. And then it's kind of a hassle to try to make this work again, because you're not going to be able to just touch up one spot to make it match. You can see around the tuning machines where it's lighter, so that's the area that wasn't exposed to light, and then the rest of the mahogany here has changed color over time with exposure to light. So you're going to cut through the finish and you're going to sand away any potential, any of this patina. You're going to sand that away, and then you're going to have a light spot right here. And so option one, try to remove this. Option two, try to sand it level and then have to do touch up. And option three is just to leave it, which is what I'm going to do. And it bums me out, because if this were cracked and this were loose, I could remove it, clean it, fit it, and get it back in there, so at the very least it's flush. I think the person took this tuning machine off, slapped some glue in there, and screwed the tuning machine back down, and that's how they quote unquote fixed it, which is a real shame. This is a DIY butcher job, and it's really irritating, because I know that I could have fixed this much, much better, but I'm not going to do anything about it now. To me, the damage has been done by the DIYer that slapped a blob of glue in there and then screwed the tuning machine back on. I'm almost certain that's what they did, because just how they've cared for this guitar, they didn't care. So it's a bummer, but structurally it's fine. So we're going to move on from there. All right, the first thing I'm going to do the bridge, and I really don't think it needs any sort of extensive detailing at all. I mean, these are straight up nice guitars, nice parts. But what I want to do, go ahead and hit this with a drop of oil on these parts, and then see how they turn. It looks pretty nice and clean. This could arguably be overkill, but hey, it's not going to hurt anything to get a little oil on there. And I've said it on other videos, but if you do end up disassembling a bridge, it's always a good idea to just double check the length of the screws before you do that, because on these saddle height screws, they can sometimes be different heights, and you can see on this one, the intonation screw on the high E is longer. So a minor thing to pay attention to. I'm going to let that soak. Then I'm going to get a screwdriver on these, and they feel really good. And this may be all it needs. I'm not going to disassemble it and flatten the block or anything like that. It's a nice bridge. Let's get some Allen wrenches on those. When a bridge is really, really old and dirty and corroded, I'll take a dental pick and clean out some people use a guitar string, but I'll clean out the inside of these Allen screws, scrape them out before I put a wrench on there. Everything turns really, really well. No major concerns here at all. Just a drop. Get in there with a swab and clean up all the parts really nice. See all those fingerprints and smudges and dirt. Get all that cleaned up, and I think this will be ready to go back on. Crud underneath. For this, I'm just going to use a little bit of naphtha. And this might call for a little bit of grease, so it's not just metal on metal. So I'll probably do that. Now that it's clean. This one's really not that bad. Everything will get dialed back in during the setup. So I think that's good on that. Here's what I came up with for the wiring. Normally I just do something on a scratch of paper or just wing it off the top of my head. And so this time I forced myself to do a proper drawing so that I have a record of it. And it's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is have a coil cut for the neck and a coil cut for the bridge so that you're not forced to cut both at the same time, which is what the original design was. And then there's going to be 3 push-pull pots. And so here's the coil cut for the neck. Here's the coil cut for the bridge, and then this is going to be a phase switch, and it's going to flip the phase of the bridge pickup so that when you're humbucking in both, in middle position, you have both pickups on, you'll get an out of phase Peter Green type sound. And so this is for those folks that want to be able to cut their bridge into a single coil, they can. For those that don't want to, they're not forced to. They can just flip this to cut the coil on the neck, keep the bridge in humbucking, and then when both pickups are being used together, they can flip the phase. So if you wanted to use a different set of pickups, you can substitute your manufacturer pickup information by knowing the finish and starts. You just have to know if you're using DiMarzio or Duncan or any other manufacturer what your finish and starts are, and you can make it work for this. So pretty simple. It should be fun. It should be a good little wiring. I did manage to find a used set of Lawler Imperial humbuckers, and these are the push-pull pots that I'm talking about. So a little circuit board instead of the older style. And so essentially what you've got going on is a bunch of different terminals. We've got common 1, common 2, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 and 2 are connected to common 1, 3 and 4 are connected to common 2. When you pull the switch up, your odd numbers are engaged. So 1 is connected to C1, 3 is connected to C2, and down, 2 is connected to C1, and 4 is connected to C2. So it's up is odd, down is even, and you can configure them kind of however you want to. So that's a phase switch. That's a simple coil cut with your series link. And so I'm excited to get this guitar done, plug it in, and hear it. These are all going to be 500K pots to go along with the Lawler Imperials. That's it.